Okay, I think we are live. There we go. Hello, everyone. Hi. We are currently waiting for Lauren to join us. There we go. Hey, Lauren.
Hello, Obsi, what's up?
Nothing much. I'm so excited to have you here
I know,
today.
I'm excited.
Yeah, long time no see. So, we're gonna let everyone trickle in, but as they come in, I could start us off real quick. Hello, everyone. My name is Opsi Bibi. I'm a student organizer and one of the new Activation Hub leaders at YAP. And quick summary for anyone who's new to YAP, we are a nonprofit organization that works to empower youth, including those under the voting age, to make an impact on all levels of government and in their very own communities. And we are, strong believers of youth civic engagement, and we've seen firsthand the monumental work they've done. And I'm actually joined here today by one of the monumental youth activists that I speak of. Lauren, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and the work you do?
Sorry about that.
So,
I'm Lauren Payne. I'm a senior at Montgomery High School in Maryland, and I recently just got really got involved in activism during the summer. I'm a part of school groups like MSP and the Black Student Union, but I'm also a part of outside organizations like MoCo for Change and Young People for Progress.
hmm And you mentioned how you got really involved this summer. I was wondering, could you tell us a little more about that and also just like, your general personal narrative of how you were drawn to advocacy?
Well, yeah, I think my parents always kind of raised me to be more politically active. That's just something that I've always known to do. I was always watching the news and keeping up with different current events and always pretty outspoken on certain things like that. And then this summer, obviously, with everything that was happening with Black Lives Matter and the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that kind of it really impacted me in a deep way. And me and my friends actually organized a protest in Rockville. And after organizing that protest in Rockville, it really kind of skyrocketed, and I started really getting involved in hands-on frontline advocacy and like going to protest all over DC and really starting to take like leadership roles in these like different organizations.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that protest that you organized in Rockville because I was actually there and I was there and I witnessed not only your speech in the beginning, but also the testimonies of many student organizers there talking about, microaggressions, racial inequity.
Yeah.
And thank you for hosting that. But I was also wondering if you could like tell us a little more about Young People for Progress. You mentioned it earlier, and I was wondering like what's your role in that among the other organizations that you're also part of?
Yeah, so I'm actually the new president of Young People for Progress. They're closing out their calendar year, so I'm kind of just I'm stepping in for the moment as president. But yeah, it's an advocacy organization for young people under the age of 35, just to get involved with civic action, policy making. Right now, they're doing a campaign to reimagine policing in Montgomery County. It's six demands, one of those being to remove SROs, remove police from traffic enforcement, engage in harm reduction, invest in communities, and yeah, a lot of other things.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, especially the part about the SROs. You and I were talking about that previously. And just like a quick summary for those who've joined and don't know what SROs are. In Montgomery County, SROs are school resource officers, and there's been a lot of controversy over removing them because many people, especially students of color and students with disabilities, find that SROs haven't fulfilled their purpose. And instead, there's been a lot of miscommunication, mistreatment, racial profiling, and just overall injustice that feeds into the school to prison pipeline, among other issues. And Lauren, and I've heard like the town halls that you've been hosting with Young People for Progress to remove them. And I was actually wondering the other demands that you were talking about, specifically looking at Montgomery County Police, the police department. I know you guys have been doing a lot of work looking at the education system and SROs, but I was wondering, have you done any like county-wide work looking at the police?
Well, yeah, I've done after organizing the protest this summer. I actually met with the Rockville City Police Department and just had a really kind of open conversation about things that have been happening, things that have been happening in Montgomery County in the past. After that, I also organized another town hall which was a community discussion with students and police officers and the county council. Again, opening up this dialogue about policing in Montgomery County. And from there, after joining White PP is when I personally kind of signed on to their demands and like went head on into like their different demands about defunding MCPD, which is like a big term and not a lot of people understand what defunding means. But basically that just looks like cutting funding from the police department and reinvesting it into communities. Like, for example, removing SROs would basically mean not only removing them from schools, but taking that $3 million and investing it into students, like giving them more mental health resources, investing in restorative justice practices, and also cutting resources from the police department in general across Montgomery County would look at investing in communities and making public spaces for the homeless and things of that nature.
Exactly. And there's been like so much, not only, controversy and like discussions, but a lot of other legislators as well have also been trying to pick up policy that's been working towards this and working towards the, accomplishing those demands. I believe it was either last week or the week before Will Jawando and Evan Glass passed that resolution. And I was wondering if, did like Young People for Progress, like what are your next steps regarding that resolution that was passed and working to further enforce that change that needs to happen in Montgomery County?
Yeah, so it was Hans Riemer actually and Will Jawando passed a bill to not only remove SROs from schools, but also reallocate that $3 million into different other practices. And so I think we were very influential in getting that bill passed. I went to tons of meetings with all the council members, trying to get them to pass a resolution. And then after hosting a rally with YPP, we had Will Jawando and Hans Riemer speak where they publicly introduced their bill. And I guess like next steps, what that looks like is testifying. There was just a bill appropriation hearing where many students and different adult activists testified in favor of the bill appropriations, which is basically obviously like reallocating that money. And then right now it looks like public education. Like you said earlier, like I've been hosting so many town halls about SROs. I'm doing 2 this week. I'm doing 1 tomorrow and 1 on Saturday. And then also preparing testimonies for things happening in January. The actual bill hearing to remove SROs is in January. And I'll be testifying at that and also kind of gathering other student activists to testify at that as well.
That's great. And I know the one that's happening tomorrow, I believe, is with Montgomery County Students for Change. Like I've been seeing some graphics being posted about that as well. And, shifting gears a little, just to touch on Montgomery County Students for Change, it has been a really big initiative, and I am a Montgomery County student, so I've like seen all the amazing work that you guys have been doing. I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about that as well.
Yeah, well, Mocha for Change has been working on a lot recently.
Yeah.
Specifically during the election cycle, we did actually did a campaign with YAP, which was Mocha to 100, where the goal was to get every eligible high school senior registered to vote. We ended up registering about over 1,000, I think. I don't know the like direct number, but yeah, registering students to vote right now. Another project that we're working on is the Georgia Runoff. They're actually held a phone banking training tonight, I think, to teach students how to phone bank for the Georgia Runoff. And then also getting involved into things like this, the SRO removal bill. They've been a pretty active group. One of the more like bigger student groups to actually sign on to those demands and publicly support the removal of SROs. So that's some of the stuff they've been working on as of the moment.
Yeah. And, so much amazing work is getting done. I was just wondering, like, for our viewers, some of which are, youth activists themselves and are trying to either start up some of their own organizations or are trying to continue leading their current organizations, could you tell us a little bit about the work ethic and perhaps even like the leadership structure in whether it's like Montgomery County Students for Change or Young People for Progress that really helps you guys, be efficient and make meaningful change in your communities?
Well, I think the overall leadership structure throughout some other like things I'm a part of is just like you obviously have your exec board, your main people like president, vice president, secretary, all those people who are kind of leading, I guess, the charge and whatnot, and then you have kind of all the other members. But what that looks like is just like tons of collaboration. It's never like one person kind of, I guess, doing it all by themselves. You're obviously working with tons of other people, and so collaboration is very, very important. and you're gonna see groups collaborate on a lot of things. Like if as like a YPP member and a Mocha for Change member, I kind of bridge the gap sometimes between those two groups, and I'm kind of like the voice in both and kind of connecting those two orgs, which you'll see a lot if people are in multiple different things.
Yeah.
But right now, especially with the YPP demands, it is a lot of work. You know, you're preparing, you're doing things that you're not really used to as far as like preparing testimony, meeting with elected officials. Oops, sorry about that. Meeting with elected officials and just doing so much work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And in terms of the testimonies and meeting with elected officials, I know right now it's, with the council, well, not the council, the state delegate, like wrapping up their session and all of that. Should we, I mean, for Montgomery County residents such as myself, should we expect to see anything big coming up?
Well, I think as far as like looking at Montgomery County students, I think the most pressing thing is the SRO removal bill. I personally feel really, really good about it. I think the students have been putting in tons and tons of work. So that's going to be really big. And also the boundary analysis.
Yeah.
There's actually just a new coalition formed, the Integration Coalition, with a bunch of different student groups that are working specifically on the boundary analysis and doing all of that work. So I think this upcoming year is going to be really interesting for that as well, specifically for Montgomery County, and that should be very interesting.
Yeah, and I think like everything that's happening in Montgomery County is honestly just a testament to the power of youth, especially when, we actually come together and get things done. And I'm so happy that you're here to tell us more about that. And speaking of this coalition, I know of it through MCR, but I didn't know that it was like multiple organizations that are joining. Are Young People for Progress and or Montgomery County Students for Change thinking about joining, or have they already even?
Montgomery County Students for Change has already joined. I'm not sure if YPP is going to be joining just because it's more like student group based.
Hmm.
But yeah, Montgomery County Students for Change has joined, and like that's kind of in like kind of the beginning stages as we're kind of getting organized with everything.
Hmm. That's really great to hear. And I think one of the questions that that's getting asked a lot recently, specifically looking at advocacy, is how are we doing it, online? Because of the pandemic, everything has been moved to become virtual. So what tips do you have for working remotely and safely, of course? And if, like, what has gone well for you, what hasn't, and how have you overcome that?
Scheduling and being organized is super important. I've definitely been like fall victim to kind of over like booking my maybe like I've had like 6 Zoom calls like in a row after school, which
Yeah.
is like a lot. So making sure you're planning out and like scheduling properly and also taking breaks, it can be super hard. Like if you're a part of like multiple different organizations and like on top of schoolwork and like school clubs. So staying organized is extremely important and not spreading yourself too thin,
Yeah.
but kind of making the most of it at the same time, it's still important work that you're doing and the pandemic shouldn't stop the work you can do now that we have like technology and things like Zoom. So I mean, continuing the work, but also like being mindful and taking care of yourself, I think is really important.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. I think people have forgotten that, yes, it is a pandemic, but there's still so much that can be done virtually. And the work that you guys do is just a testament enough to that. I would also like to add that for everyone who's watching right now, I forgot to mention this earlier, but if you have any questions as we're talking, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll be like, it's like live, so I can see everything that you guys say. And I'm pretty sure Lauren will be more than happy to answer any questions. But moving along to talk more about that, like, virtual advocacy, has there been like any troubles that you've like found other than like back-to-back Zoom calls? Like, has there been like trouble connecting with legislators or just anything that you would expect youth activists who are either watching this right now or will watch this later to come across, and how would you recommend that they overcome that?
No, definitely. I think connecting, yeah, you hit it right in the ball. Connecting with legislators is super hard, especially like when like not checking their emails. It's hard to get meetings with them because they're doing a lot. There's tons of things happening right now. Like 2020 has been insane. So trying to get your like foot in there to begin with is super, super hard to get meetings and to even have them read your emails and stuff like that. That's definitely been a thing a big thing and like a personal like frustration for me when like you have to send tons of emails and like things are rescheduled. But just sticking with it, I guess. No, they're busy, and I think you have to like understand that they're busy and just kind of making sure like it's okay to follow up with people. I used to be really scared to follow up with people, like whether it was like teachers, legislators, whoever it is, but knowing that like you can follow up with them and you can kind of badger them a little bit if you want to get something done, and like that's okay.
Yeah. And like looking at following up with legislators, has that ever been a case for you where you've had to like repeatedly reach out? And if so, what did you do next? Like, what was like your next step going from that, consistently calling or emailing?
What it, I mean, well, more recently, I know that I've been doing some obviously work with SROs and trying to get meetings with like the county council and board of education. I kind of hit a brick wall with the board of education just because they're jam packed with trying to reopen and doing tons of things.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to work around that and kind of go to the SMOB and then go to Lynn Harris, who is the newly appointed
Yeah.
um, board of education member. So I went to her and I went to Nick, and then they kind of connected me to the board, and then the board got back to me. So I kind of had to do like lots of jumping around hoops to finally be able to get in like contact with their main person, um, which was still a little weird because it was their secretary, not someone on the board. But
Yeah.
I'm bounced around with people who I was like connecting with, but it worked
Yeah.
out at the because I got to.
Yeah, which is great. And I think it's amazing that you were able to, be flexible and troubleshoot your way through that to
Yeah.
ensure that whatever you were still fulfilling whatever goals that you had. And coming back around to like the town halls that we were discussing, I know for a few of them, you mentioned you had one with the Rockville Police Department. Have you had like other events with other, notable figures? And if so, I was just wondering like how has the community discussion been there? Because I know for some of the town halls with police departments, I wouldn't say it was the best discussion. There was definitely some, tense relations and arguing there. But from what you've experienced, how have you like handled those community discussions and ensured that it doesn't turn into, a back and forth of just people shouting at each other, but like a productive session?
Well, I think, I mean, as a preface, this, I probably wouldn't meet with like the Rockwood Police Department right now where I
Yeah.
stand. These are different than they were before, and I think that was mainly the main goal for that. I feel like was just having students be able to ask questions because there's so much misinformation going around, and students don't really
Yeah.
know where to look. And if someone's trying to form an opinion on the police, what's better to do that than actually sitting down with them, right?
Yeah.
That was the main purpose of that. But I think, I mean, I guess I still would do that in order for like students to be able to just hear information from direct sources and kind of gauge their own and how they feel about police. But I think the different more major events that I've went to, I spoke at American University um at a class there, and that class was interesting. It was a lot of different people, a lot of different students as well who had like very very vast opinions on policing, like some who like were full on for abolishing the police and some for
Yeah.
who weren't for that at all. But it remained very calm, very cool. But it was still like a tough conversation. I think that's where things kind of turned for me, like hearing people who have like a very very like kind of so-called like radical view on policing and abolition, which kind of switched it for me, is why I'm kind of more on the like very far left side on that, which is probably why like my opinions on meeting with the police is different now. But I personally think maintaining like a very very calm discussion and like a civil discussion is important, just because I don't think you're going to get any like real things done if you're just kind of screaming back and forth and no one's listening to each other.
Yeah.
No matter what I'm doing, I'm always going to try to maintain like have the conversation be like at a certain like respectful like civil level.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I mean, yeah, 2020 has been, well, just 2020 and the years leading up to 2020 have been, there's been a lot of, political polarization, people going to like the far rights and lefts and like not meeting in that moderate middle with each other anymore. And for the most part, for the work that you do, it seems like you don't face that problem a lot. And if that's wrong, feel free to correct me. But for the people who have the same views, well, mostly the same views, how do you guys like fact check yourself? Meaning like, how do you still ensure that you're not staying within your own bubble and you're still hearing other perspectives and you're really broadening the conversations that you're having?
I mean, I think this past summer, I mean, as far as like having discussions and forums and whatnot, I tend to be surrounded with people who think the same as me. But I mean, going like being out the front lines protesting, like I've been like in situations where you face like counter protesters, which is not the same just because that's a totally different environment.
Yeah.
But I think you have to do like lots of self fact checking, if that makes sense. Like you have to look into your own bias,
Yeah.
especially if you're holding a town hall or you're writing an op-ed or you're doing any like public outreach things. Like you have to be kind of like as like unbiased as you can, just so it doesn't seem like a little bit weird. And I think you just have to kind of do your own research and making sure that you're getting checked by your peers as well in a way, if that makes sense. Just
Yeah,
because
it does.
I'll think the same, but taking the extra mile to do the extra research, look into opposite point of view so that not only you know what the opposition is thinking, but you also have that point of view in the back of your head when you're doing like arguments. Like
Yeah.
well, in my MSP, we want them to make a statement about the removal of SROs, but before they make a statement, we're having the whole entire MSP intern cohort meet with someone who is pro SRO.
Oh.
Make sure that like we're not seen as biased or that everyone's kind of on the same page. Like after this, all the students meet with the opposition, we all can come to a consensus and vote, not just having me, for example, like take the charge and speak for this whole group of students.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that initiative. I've never heard like any sort of initiative like that before, which I think is really interesting because, there's so much danger in sticking with people who have the same beliefs as you because then that's the only thing you're getting exposed to and you're never really broadening your thoughts and also the resolutions that you propose. It would only be benefiting people who think just like you. But I love that you guys are taking initiative to do that. And I was wondering, could you tell us a little more about that?
For the MSP thing.
Yeah. And
Um
like
so,
have you finished it yet? Like how has like the feedback been?
well, I think most of the MSP interns are kind of on the same page with me again. Like they all are for the removal, and they also all want to learn more about it because some of them aren't like as knowledgeable. And I think the main idea was that students just gain more perspective. The coordinators, like the whole adults in charge of the MSP interns, didn't want it to seem as if they were kind of making like students believe one way or that they were speaking
Yeah.
for like writing a statement in support because it would be kind of a big deal for a group like MSP, like a countywide program to kind of come out
Yeah.
in this way. So I just wanted to be as like thorough as possible and make sure that we all do hear from the opposite side and kind of are able to form our own opinions based off of that. And I think that's honestly a smart way to go about it, just so that you do give students the opportunity to hear both sides. But yeah.
Yeah. And have you guys like where are you like in terms of this initiative? Like have you talked to the other people yet?
Well, we I gave a presentation from the MSP for the removal, and
Mhm.
then which was kind of a short presentation at the task force meeting, and then I'm in the process of scheduling the whole meeting for MSP to meet with someone who doesn't support who does support SROs. So like I'm in the process of planning that meeting out. That should be done this weekend or maybe early next week, and
Okay.
then
And then
um meet for a vote to see if we want to write the statement.
oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And when you guys have this statement prepared, it's going to be going towards the bill that was proposed by Will Jawando, correct?
Yeah, in support of the bill to remove SROs.
That's I think that's going to make a really big impact. I think every time like testimonies are heard by, adults like who are in these really big decision-making bodies, it's definitely a reckoning that they probably don't have because, they're always stuck with like adults who aren't in school and aren't experiencing these things firsthand. So these testimonies will be really impactful. And just like taking a step back to look at advocacy in general from a broader view, I did have one last question that was I think honestly probably one of the most important things we'll talk about today because YAP and Montgomery County Students for Change and so many other advocacy organizations answer this question almost every day throughout the work that we do. But what would you say to students who are either watching right now or just might watch this later or just in general in the world who want to get involved in advocacy but don't know how?
I think you have to find an issue that you're extremely passionate about. I think you're going to find a moment where everything kind of changes for you, if that makes sense. Like for me, I've always been interested in this. I've always kind of been pushed to do this, like by my parents. But for me, it really was earlier this year when George Floyd died, when Breonna Taylor, all that was happening. Like it was like in a way kind of a wake up call. It's like
Yeah.
I say something, and that if I say something, it needs to be impactful. And after planning the protest, it made me realize like I have a voice and I can do this, and that I can actually make change if I put my mind to it, and if I really, really stand behind what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think a student has, whether it's from like educational justice, racial justice, mental health, if you have one thing you're passionate about, if you have one idea and you stand by that, then no one can refute it. Like no one can kind of tell you that it's not valid because you believe in it. And it only takes one idea and one thing you're passionate about to really spark that. Once you have that, then you just gotta believe it.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it. Um, and like for like in terms of next steps, what would you recommend for students once they have, the issue that they're passionate about and that they want to advocate for or against in some cases, then what would you recommend doing?
Research. I
Yeah.
think looking to what's already being done. For example, if you're interested in educational justice in your specific area, are there any other groups already doing educational justice? Is there a campaign already happening for educational justice? If there's not a group, make a group. If there's not a campaign, do a campaign. Or if there is a group, join that group and have your voice heard in that group. Elevate that group up so that you guys can really make change. I think a lot of things happen. And this happens a lot in Montgomery County, because we're very heavy on like student activist culture, and
Yeah.
but you can also have like multiple groups working towards the same exact thing where it kind of counters each other. Sometimes it works. Like for example, you have different like YPP, not YPP, Mocha for a Change, like Mocha Steps, for example.
Yeah.
Um, but like when they come together on certain issues, like the boundary analysis, that just makes it like more powerful. But in some cases, like they can hinder each other. So I would just do your research on see what's already being done where you are, and then kind of go from there and see what like
Yeah.
your next step is in that research.
Yeah, I think that's honestly the best way to go, especially in terms of, connecting with other organizations, as you mentioned. And for like I think in the age of activism, with so many students starting up either their own initiatives or collabing and joining other initiatives, I think there's definitely been a couple of, pulls and tugs in like the field of activism once it comes to like who's going to do what. But in terms of just uniting and making sure that at the end of the day, the voices that need to be heard the most are being uplifted and the issues that need to be resolved are being resolved, how would you recommend going about, like this communication, like making sure that you're reaching out to others and you're doing it in like a respectful way and still getting your message across?
I think in terms of like if you're talking about like collaboration and just trying to
Yeah.
get people, it's really these days it's so easy to connect with people. It's so easy like shoot a DM and say, hey, I know you guys are working on this project. I'm thinking of doing something similar. Do you guys need any help with it, or is there a way we can collab? I know that I've definitely done that in the past. I've reached out to organizations, and saying like, for example, like I'm in YPP. YPP is doing this. I know you guys are big in racial justice. Right now, we're trying to focus on um, policing and how that intertwines with racial justice. Would you want to collaborate on something? I think having those types of conversations are like really great, and also that can lead you to new things. Like I most of like if I joined an organization, it's because I kind of was doing research and reaching out on behalf of something else. So you can also get introduced to new things like within that process.
Yeah. And I think also just like taking initiative to
Yeah.
do all of that plays such a key role. And for students who, like we've had, you and I like have talked to students through the Activation Hub who have either felt anxious about reaching out or just, just have some social anxiety. How would you recommend like overcoming that and really stepping out of your bubble to ensure that your voice is still being heard?
I mean, it's hard. Like it's not easy. It's not easy to
Yeah.
do anything, especially like when you're depending on the level you're doing it as. Like if you're lobbying, starting a campaign, like all of that is extremely extremely hard. Um, the only advice I can say for that is just jump. Like you like have like I don't know how to even say like because it's so hard. Like
Yeah.
I know I've been nervous and there's times where I've been like, oh my god, like how is this gonna work? But just know that you're gonna be okay and that if you do your research and you're like knowledgeable and you're passionate it's going to be so hard for anyone to kind of hinder that. So just having that confidence in yourself and having that confidence that, you know, this is what you want to do, this is what you're passionate about, and that if you don't speak up for this issue, you don't know who else is going to. So just
Yeah,
that someone has to do it, and like if you think, and if that's you, then that's beautiful. Like it's not easy to do what you're doing, and having that type of confidence and knowing that, I think, is a good push for some students.
exactly. That actually reminds me of the quote. I believe it's from Emma Watson. If not you, who? If not
Yeah,
now, when?
that's
Yeah,
like if I'm not gonna do it, like who's gonna do it, you know? And I so it's just that's a big push for me.
exactly. And I don't know if I've missed any questions, but I hope I haven't. But if there's nothing else that anyone has to ask, I think everything Lauren has said is honestly, I know I'm definitely taking all of this advice and putting it into use. And I really do hope that everyone who has watched will also do the same themselves. But if there's no other questions, and if Lauren, you don't have anything else to add, then I think we could wrap this up. Yeah.
Having you here, this was super. This is really good questions. I'm so
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who came out today. We're definitely going to be attaching Lauren's social media handles and all of the social media handles of the organization she's part of below. So keep an eye out for that and join any of these initiatives if you're feeling interested. And this live will also be posted on YAP's YouTube and Twitter, I believe. So feel free to rewatch it, share it with others. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, reach out to YAP or even Lauren through our socials, and we'll definitely get back to you. But other than that, thank you again so much, Lauren. This was so enlightening hearing about all this amazing work that you do. And thank you to everyone who's been watching. We hope this has been helpful and definitely something to, take back with you and just think over. And yeah,
yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. This has been so
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Bye. Have a great night. Okay.